My name is Patrick, I'm a small creator, I'm an artist, and I'm making my own comic book series. Let's talk about what's going on in the world of Exofox. That's right, I am making a comic book series called Exofox Esquire. I've never really made a comic book series before. I've really only drawn one comic when I started this project. And yeah, we're diving deeper into that world today. This is my second update, but actually since the last video I have released one issue, the 3 Trials of Exofox, which followed the events of the first issue, and today is actually the launch of the 3rd issue, Into Erratic Space, which is unique to the series in that it is the first of a 5-part story. This is the setup of an adventure into an area of space called Erratic Space, which is dangerous and mysterious and unknown, all in search of a special item called the exogenic engine. And yeah, I'm excited for this story. I think it's really cool. I think some of the pictures are the best I've ever drawn. And I thought I'd talk a little bit in this video about the process of making a comic book series and what it took to get where I am today. Because the truth is I've never written a comic this long. I had focused primarily on doing short story, sort of 10-page comics with a very clear sense of this is not going to last beyond the 10 pages. You know, do a start, a middle, and an end, reach a climax, and finish the story. And yet, that's not necessarily how all stories are told, right? Some stories are longer and happen over a number of issues, and so I wanted to challenge myself to dive into a story that was longer, and it took a little bit of work, because pulling the trigger on this would have been risky, right? If I didn't have a sense of where it was going and what it was going to look like, I may be pulling the trigger on something that I wouldn't ultimately finish, right? If I was to say, hey, this is the first part of a 5-part series, here's part 1, and I have no idea what's coming next, I would be in a lot of trouble. And so to make this work, I needed to have a sense of the whole. I wanted to make the promise of a 5-part story, and to do that, I needed 3 things. The first thing I needed was a story arc, right? I needed to have a sense of what each issue in the comic was going to provide to our story, how the story was going to move from issue 1 to issue 2 to 3 to 4 and ultimately to 5. And that meant that I needed to have a large sense of what the point of this was. What was the challenge at the center of the story? What was the desire at the center of the story? And how was that going to resolve as we moved through the events of the story? And so I really needed to do something called plotting. So I didn't write every single detail about my story. In fact, I really only wrote 5 things down on a piece of paper, which was issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, and issue 5. And underneath each of them, I had a starting point and an end point. And each of the starting points was meant to be just sort of a link to the last issue, except for, of course, the first one. And each ending point was supposed to be a climax to lead us into the next story. And in between each of these things, I wrote the thing that happens. So, for example, in this first issue, we start with a meeting between 2 characters and end with a rise of tension when we learn something special about what is happening. And in between, I needed to accomplish a few things. I needed to introduce the characters that were central to the story. I needed to introduce the motivation behind what was happening in the story, and I needed to get us to that ending / cliffhanger. And I think I did an okay job of that. And you know, when writing an introduction to a story, it's a little bit more nuanced because you got to sort of introduce a lot more. And so I'm excited to see what happens as I move through my plots in 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. The second thing I needed was characters, and specifically characters with wants and needs. So I've written a few Exofox stories so far, and often I just place Exofox in danger with a desire to either survive or to make money. And that really works in a short form story because the desire can be relatively simple, right? Because the story in itself is also very simple. But when you start building a longer, larger story, you suddenly have to start thinking about more than one character and their desires, particularly because the expectation at the beginning of the story and the results at the end of the story may ultimately differ, and those desires may need to be challenged. In fact, that's one of the big things that makes a cool story. So in this story, I designed 3 characters to join, one of which already existed. Abigail Albright was in the first issue as a antagonistic figure. And then I designed 2 new characters, one of which is a robot, the science bot, Nift, and the leader of our expedition, the person who's working towards all this, Llewellyn P. Drogan, the famed explorer. And these 4 characters needed their own motivations and reasons for going on this mission. We have Exofox, who is looking for some money, as per usual. We have Llewellyn P. Drogan, who is trying to get this special item in order to get rich quick, if you will. They're both motivated primarily by money. Nift is a science bot and has studied erratic space and really just wants to come along for profit, but also for knowledge. And Annabelle Albright is coming because her boss told her to come, and it's her job to make sure that the mission is profitable for her boss, the lovely and wonderful magistrate from the previous issue. Now, each of these characters have their own motivations for being there, but they also have their own sense of morals and reasons to exist in this world. And, knowing these wants and needs and who these characters are is a critical part of putting them into the story arc that we talked about just a moment ago. That there will be moments when they all face challenges as a group, and how they decide to act in those challenges depends largely on who they are. And so it was really important for me, as I sat down to prepare to write this story and make these comics, that I give these characters their own sense of characterization, their own wants and needs, and maybe opportunities to grow and change or respond in ways that are unique and surprising. And with the story arc and characters in hand, I needed one final thing to make this story, and that was trust. Trust primarily in myself. It's a big gamble to do anything where you are the sole person invested in the outcomes. Making YouTube videos, streaming, doing art in general, all these things that I do take a lot of trust in myself, that I can believe that I can do the things that I set out to do. And when it comes to writing and drawing and making a comic, it's a lot of time invested on the front end to get something done. And that's just for a single issue. Now here I'm trying to tell this 5-part story, and I have to rely on the fact that I'm going to make it from beginning to end. And in fact, offering this product, right, selling this comic and selling this first piece of the story comes with an implied truth that if you purchase into it, I'm going to finish it, right? I'm going to tell that story all the way to the end. And I am, don't get me wrong. But that comes with a certain level of personal trust, a belief in myself. And this, I think, is absolutely critical to artists, to creators, to makers, to people who want to tell their own stories and make their own unique things. You gotta trust in yourself. And while my trust in myself can wobble, as any normal person's can, I'm really excited to see where this story goes, to how it finishes, what it looks like in the end, and I hope you join me on that journey. So yeah, this is my comic book, and this is the newest issue, Into Erratic Space. Here's some pictures from that story as a little bit of a preview. If you want to check it out, it's not super expensive. You can find it over on my website, www.artbysutherland.com. It's coming out today, so you can purchase it there. You can also become a member of my Patreon to get access to all of the previous Exofox stories and a bunch of other things. I try to keep my Patreon members able to access all of those stories as a way of saying thank you for choosing to support me in that way. It's actually cheaper there. I don't want to alarm you or give away too many of the golden gooses, if you will. But yeah, if you want to check it out, patreon.com/artbysutherland. And that's going to be it for today. Here's the drawing that I was drawing in the background. I hope you enjoyed talking a little bit about the making process, about what I'm working on, and make sure you subscribe and follow to keep following along with the art process. I'm going to keep talking about these projects as I work on them because I think it's interesting and good for me to share. And so yeah, and of course, till next time, keep being awesome.